Video game controllers. Not all of these controllers are winners, as we will see in this video. Speaking of this video, I will only be talking about first party controllers because they should know better. Third party controllers, I think we can all agree that it's a very mixed bag. Speaking of bag, this is a bag of a controller right here. Credit where credit's due, I do need to congratulate Microsoft for managing to get the Hulk to beta test their console at the time, but I don't understand why they had to keep this size for the controller. This thing is just a sack of plastic for no reason. Now, why is the logo so big? It looks like an arc reactor. Especially at this angle, it just looks like a circle. Like, how do you make a controller look fat? How did they manage to pull that off? Not to mention, this has to be the most depressed, most miserable looking D-pad I have ever seen, if you can even call it that. Where's the plus exactly? This thing looks like a rolled up sock. Also, I would like to apologise on Xbox's behalf if you ever have to pause using this controller, because why would you want to pause using this controller? Look how far away and tucked away those buttons are. What a miserable controller. Now let's go to the opposite spectrum. Here we have a Nintendo Joy-Con. Now before you get upset for me saying that, I don't have any problems yet. Problems located. I swear, every single time I have to bring my Switch to a gathering, every single time, there are always complaints about how we're playing Mario Kart that day. And for good reason, I don't blame them. Why would anyone want to play this way, especially if you can't find your straps? Saying that this is way too small is an understatement. The triggers are absolutely trash, as again, like I said, without the straps, I mean, I don't think I need to say anything. I think you guys are in pain just watching this. Another thing that you've probably noticed is that the button layout no longer makes sense. The amount of times that we're playing Mario Kart and they need to pause because they don't understand the button layout. But because some people have the directions as A, B, X, Y, or they have A, B, X, Y but on the side, so it's even more confusing, explaining to people the controls of a game like Mario Kart is a big pain. And this is an even bigger deal when you consider that the Switch is targeted at a more casual audience. How are casuals going to learn if they have to deal with this? I mean, even if they pass that, they also have to battle with drift 9 times out of 10. I guarantee that you watching this video right now, if you have a Nintendo Switch, you have Joy-Con drift. So yeah, there's no winning with playing with the Joy-Con sideways. Just go bankrupt and buy a brand new controller for Nintendo Switch, dash it at your friend, and have a good gaming sesh. So, we've looked at Microsoft, we've looked at Nintendo. It's only right that I talk about Sony, right? Now, what I'm about to say, I feel like you guys are going to take my head off in the comments, but you know what? I'm just going to say it. The PS1, 2 and 3 controllers suck. Now obviously design wise they are very iconic, there is no disputing that. I think that they look visually cool, but in terms of the feel, I have never liked how these controllers felt. They are so plasticky and uncomfortable. Whose hands are fitting these handles? Like, unless you're a baby, and even then, this is just super unethical to have really small handles like this. The D-pad, I'm sorry, is just awful, and I'm so glad that they improved upon it when it came to the PS4 and then obviously the PS5. L2 and R2 just aren't satisfying to use, especially compared to the newer DualShock controllers, which is a big shame. I don't like the rubbery start and select buttons, and I don't like the super plasticky X, circle, square and triangle buttons. L1 and R1 are still pretty satisfying to use though, very clicky, and it's fun to play around with during loading times. But regardless, although not the worst thing ever, it's far from the best. This controller is very fortunate that it has a very sleek and classic design, so I'll give it a slight pass here. But come on Sony, I mean you were already going to collab with Nintendo before the PlayStation, so I don't see why you could have taken some advice from Nintendo to form a design for this controller. Sony, I am incredibly proud of you. You didn't do anything stupid on your first attempt, and you kept in mind that humans only have 2 arms, so massive props to you. My respect for this controller has skyrocketed. Speaking of rockets and space, I guess, we have the Mega Drive controller, or Genesis controller, depending on where you live. I'm sorry, I'm British. Definitely a spacey looking controller. This is actually one of my favourite looking controllers ever. But in terms of using it, I was so let down, man. It's just not comfortable. If you thought that the DualShock controller handles were bad enough, this burnt croissant has possibly the most useless gaming handles ever. What is this? I'm not even going to finish that sentence. Like, I actually can't believe you looked at this and said, yes, gripping. And the other thing that I don't like about this controller is the D-pad, which unfortunately feels awkward to use outside of Street Fighter and other fighting games where you need precise movements. But for something like a platformer or like Sonic, you don't need that much. I think the Super Nintendo rolling D-pad would be much nicer. Obviously they done this because they wanted to separate themselves from Nintendo, but it's still a bit of an L. And I don't know if it's due to age on these controllers, but the last time I used a Mega Drive controller, the D-pad felt super stiff. So yeah, it's just not a good look, is it? I think out of all of the controllers that we've talked about in this video, this is definitely the one that I dislike the least. Like I said, I absolutely love how this thing looks, and everything else about the controller is fine. It's just a bit bulky and kind of awkward to use. Super Nintendo controller for the win. But Nintendo, you still need to pay for your sins for this controller. And no, I'm not even going to talk about it. This thing is traumatic to look at. We're not talking about this abomination. I can't even imagine the beta tester when he first saw the controller. Oh, what, Nintendo, you want me to test this controller? Oh yeah, sure, no problems. Let me just get my third hand out and then we can test Mario Kart 64.